Chandra, it's so nice to have you on an N of One. I'm so glad that we get to do this, especially since I just saw you not that long ago in Chicago, home of applied behavioral scientists and
Yes,
nachos. It was really lovely to see you.
that plate of nachos was amazing. It was impressive that we got through it, and I'm thrilled to be a part of the podcast. So thanks for having me.
Of course, absolutely. Well, look, you know how this goes. We walk through your whole career, your whole life, and the goal here is really to talk about your individual story. Because despite the fact that we study sort of patterns and we study large groups of people, every individual story, particularly in small groups like applied behavioral science, right? It's a small N of people that have had your kind of career and got to be kind of chief behavioral officers and those sort of things. So every story matters. And so I want to just sort of walk through your story. And I want to start at the very beginning. Like if I went and found like 7-year-old Chandra and like went and said, all right, like what are you going to be in the future when you grow up? What would she have told me? Like what was the path when you were a kid?
Yeah, it's going all the way back to 7-year-old me. Um, if you were to have asked me that question, I would have told you that I was going to be in the Marine Corps,
In the Marine
and
Corps.
not just a Marine, but an officer and maybe even the commandant of the Marine Corps and the first female. So I had grand visions of trailblazing, even at an early age.
And where did that come from?
Well, I grew up in Oceanside, California.
Just up the road from me.
Yes, and right next to Camp Pendleton, which is a Marine Corps base. My grandparents were in the Marine Corps, and my grandmother was one of the first female Marines. And so I was inspired by her. Both of them weren't college educated, and really valued education and saw a lot of potential in me and thought that I should just aim as high as possible. And that was what the gold star option was in their mind. And so I decided to aim high.
I love that. I love that they saw all of the potential that has been realized. So clearly they were right. Your grandparents, purely smart people. They knew what they were talking about. I love that Commandant was the place to go.
Yeah.
Did that last? So, now let's fast forward a bit. You're 13, 14, you're going into high school, you're starting to look at other things. Are we still going to be the Commandant of the Marine Corps?
Yeah, no, that started changing. And probably during my very formative years of um, just realizing I loved people watching. I
Mm.
loved observing. I loved questioning, why is that person doing what they're doing and what might be driving that? What are the facilitators? What's in their way of success? I had all these questions and I wanted answers. And so I would say probably, late high school, just starting out of college, I really wanted to do something that involved humans and understanding them better.
And did you have
And I didn't know necessarily what that looked like, but that was of interest to me.
did you have access to like psychology classes in high school? Some kids can now get AP psychology and that kind of stuff. Was that sort of on the radar that maybe this people orientation was going to be psych
No.
oriented?
And if I did, I probably wouldn't have taken it because I wasn't a very good student in high school. It was academics was not a huge priority, even though I knew that I wanted to get to college. So that was really my motivator is get to college, first generation college. And so I was just really climbing one step at a time.
And you did, and I mean, you did end up at college and at UC San Marcos, where you did end up in psychology and sociology. What did you think you were going to college for? Like when you sort of came in at the beginning,
Yeah,
what was the thought other than I
I
gotta be
knew I wanted to do psychology
okay?
because it really implicated human beings. I was really interested in individual differences.
Mhm.
And so that's why I went to psychology. And over time, I got interested in sociology and saw how they complement each other, which is why I decided to double major. Um, and I minored in youth and family and sociology, just because I was young. And at that point, youthful. And I sort of
You're
like had a
still
very,
youthful.
oh, you're very kind. But that was my experience so far. And I wanted to understand people who were sort of in that particular life stage. So yeah, I went to San Marcos and had a great experience.
Was the thought that this was going to be like a clinical career for you, that
It
you were
did.
going to do
It was. I
individual?
wanted to help kids. So I would say by my second year of college, I thought, I really want to help kids. I want to help them be successful. I was an Upward Bound tutor, which is a program to help first generation college high school kids get to college. I was also a student support services tutor, lead tutor. So this is really to get college students finished, and also potentially to graduate school. And so I really wanted to support youth and their success. And then, I took my first stats class, and that was the turning point for me because I, first of all, was not good in math. I took remedial math in college just to meet the math requirement. And I went into my first stats class and thought, I'm going to hate this. And I just fell in love with stats and numbers and data. And then that's when the research, door started to crack open a little bit. Like, what could I do with this? And that's when it all started.
Talk to me a little bit about that turning point of stats. First of all, why'd you end up in a stats class? Was it a
It was
requirement?
a requirement for psychology.
Got it.
Yeah, even clinical track.
Got it. And so you took this stats class. Was it the teacher? Was it the numbers? Can you take yourself back there? Like what about it sort of lit you
Yeah,
up?
I loved really everything about it. The different research scenarios that were set up and how you can actually test whether or not there were differences. How whatever we were interested in when it came to humans could be distilled into these numbers, and we could answer questions. And I thought that was just, my head exploded. I was naturally good at it. I actually ended up, by the end of the class, taking a graduate stats course. And then I ended up being a grader for the intro stats course for many semesters. And my instructor at the time also had a bunch of applied research going on. He was an applied social psychologist and started plugging me into opportunities. And that's what started to plant the seed of where I could go with this.
And at what point did you decide, hey, I'm going to keep going? Because you went straight from a BA into a sort of PhD program.
Mm-hmm.
At what point were you like, hey, this is something I want to keep going?
Yeah. Well, I started doing applied social psych research with him at what was then the San Diego Wild Animal Park. And I was not studying the primates. I was studying the humans that were going to the park. Were they looking at our, pro-environmental recycling type communications that had behavioral science baked in? And were they actually recycling the pamphlet instead of throwing it in the trash based on what we were recommending? I did that for many years and also mentored students in his conservation psychology class doing that. I then started getting interested in health and began working with an applied health psychologist. And so I was working in both of those labs and really began to love it.
What bridged you over
Go
into
ahead.
health? What was the experience that sort of made you start to go this other direction?
Yeah, great question. I was diagnosed with a chronic health condition when I was 20. And I just had to take one pill, but I hated the side effects of this pill. And so I was very non-adherent to it. And it made me ask the question, well, if I can't take one pill, what about all the people who have to take a bunch of pills? Yeah. This sucks for them. And they're probably not doing it. This is a huge problem. And so that's what piqued my interest in health and wanting to be a part of the solution.
Got it. And so then back to my question, like, when did you decide that,
Yeah.
like, all right, this is going to become a PhD thing, not a, are you, it's the end of your senior year and you decide you're going to keep going? Like, where do you decide that more education is going to be the next step?
Well, I remember asking one of my professors at the time, so like, what do you do if you want to be a researcher? Like, am I just signing up to be a research professor? Like, is that really the only option? And I remember him saying, I hope not. And I was like, at the time, I hope not too. Cause like I'm willing to do it, but I hope there's more opportunities. And so I did a summer research experience at the University of Utah. This was qualitative research interviewing HIV positive women about their work experiences and the stigma and things that they would experience. Um, and then I came back in my senior year and just started applying for graduate school all over the place, and particularly working with applied health psychologists. Um, I applied to a dozen different programs and got into four, and ultimately ended up at the University of Connecticut working with Jeffrey Fisher, and largely because he was an expert in medication adherence. And I really wanted to learn how to be a part of the solution to medication non-adherence.
Yes, I think anytime you can recognize in your own behavior, oh man, if I can't do this, and we all in the sort of Lake Wobegon effect sort of way think, well, I'm above average, and if I can't do
Yeah.
this, man, those other people must really not be doing it, right?
Mm-hmm. For
There's always
sure.
that kernel of, you know, finding yourself in the research and finding yourself in the stuff that you study and
Oh, absolutely. And I was experiencing that side of it too, because I am half American Samoan. And many of my first cousins that I went to high school with were getting diagnosed with diabetes
right.
in high school. And they were very non adherent to their insulin. And now, currently, we're all in our mid 40s, and many of them are struggling, with complications of the disease. So,
Combined your love of young people and
yes.
your interest in health.
Yeah,
And
there you go. There's the bridge.
and as you get into, when you go to UConn, is there still this statsy thread going on? Like, this part that has
Yes.
woken you up to sort of research in the first place?
Yes. Always was into it. I actually did a graduate certificate in quantitative methods. Um, so anything from meta-analyses to dyadic analyses, um, also doing causal modeling, structural equation modeling, hierarchical linear modeling. I loved the numbers.
You're like, this is all going, and so you're
Yeah.
on this very academic track, right? You do a BA, you go almost
Yeah.
immediately into a PhD program, right? You
Mm-hmm.
spend time there, and then you go almost immediately from the PhD program into an MPH program. Talk to me about like
Yeah.
what at the end, are you still thinking I'm going to become a professor someday?
Yes.
Like what is the
I
sort of
mean,
like
I
end
even
goal
applied
here?
for NIH funding to do my dissertation. So I got an RSA grant to do an intervention for Puerto Ricans with diabetes at Hartford Hospital, and it got funded. I don't know if I'd ever recommend that. So a little too much I took on. Wouldn't advise that if you're really wanting to fast track. But I realized, this is what I'm going to be signing up for if I become an academic. It's pitching my ideas to the NIH. It's getting funded to create interventions, products, and evaluating them. And so might as well, start that process. And so did that, finished up my PhD. I realized I was not ready to go into an academic position after that. I still wanted some more training, which at the time was not a message I got
Right.
from other faculty, because they didn't choose that. They went immediately into their appointments. But I ended up going to, I really wanted a medical school appointment. So I did a postdoc at a medical school at Feinberg at Northwestern in Chicago. I was a part of their health services research postdoctoral program. And as part of that, I got my master's in public health.
And what made you feel like, hey, I really want to have an appointment in a med school versus like, there are lots of folks in social psychology and
Yeah.
other departments that are doing medically related things and collaborating across those lines and those sorts of things. What made you feel like, hey, I really need to be at a med school?
So when I did my dissertation at Hartford Hospital, I was in a clinic setting. I was there in the clinic all the time. And I'm partnering with primary care providers, nurse practitioners, dietitians. And I realized this is not an environment that I'm an expert on. There's a lot that can be done when we collaborate cross-functionally, but this is a cast of characters that I don't know how to leverage very well. I don't speak their language. And in order for us to leverage each other's skills, I really think I need more experience where I can understand that world better and be a bridge. Because right now I'm on an island.
Yeah, I mean that one of the, particularly when you go directly from undergrad to grad, right? Like,
Yes.
There can be a little bit of a on rails feeling to this where you don't quite to get to have all of the, maybe outside experiences that you might want to have.
That's right.
So then you go off to this program, you do the postdoc, you get an MPH, and then when did you decide that maybe academia wasn't going to be the answer? I mean, because you had, at the same time, you're doing some consulting work with Vanguard and stuff while you're at Vandy.
Yeah.
Like you're doing some data analysis stuff while you're at Vandy. Like, talk to me about because you had this long, research career as an academic. Where in there do you start to feel like?
So it was when I was doing my postdoc and getting my MPH and working for the American Medical Association. So I had a part-time data analytics role there. I was offered a job there, but decided not to take it because I was recruited to Vanderbilt. And
what went into that calculus? Was it a hard decision, or you were like, no, I'm on these academic rails, I've got this offer at Vandy, like this is the natural next step, or was it a real?
It was a really compelling offer. It was a tenure-track position. There was startup funds. It was in the Department of Medicine. That was very unique. I would be the first behavioral scientist or non-basic researcher scientist in the Department of Medicine, which has a faculty count of over 900 faculty. And I thought, wow, this is really unique. Let's see what I can do there. I was doing diabetes research at the time, and they were one of a handful of institutions that had a lot of diabetes dollars and infrastructure. And I said yes, joined the faculty, and was there for 8 years.
But still, you knew that maybe this wasn't going to be the path, right? So you said, hey, I start to have these feelings in my postdoc that maybe I don't want to be a professor forever. And then you go take 8 years as a professor. Yeah. Talk to me about that struggle.
Well, I love doing research. I mean, I love it. It's something that I'm really passionate about. The thing that led me to really take the big leap was I was in health tech. I started doing health tech research in 2001 and watched my dissertation advisor at the time build this technology and evaluate it. And then I started doing that in my faculty appointment and created 4 different products. And it was tough. It was like starting from ground zero every single time because the infrastructure to do that it doesn't exist in that environment.
Right.
And I knew, even though once I learned kind of how to play the academic game and I knew how to publish 10 papers a year and, build this lab and get consecutive years of funding, I just knew that I would be on that hamster wheel of creating these products painfully till I was going to retire. And I just couldn't see myself doing that and making that choice. So that's what really drove me to look outside.
And what finally, what was the final, want to say nail in the coffin because it's not fair. You had a great academic career, but what was the sort of turning point that made you go, hey, I'm going to go take this one drop position and really
Yeah.
transition out of academia where, because you're in a tenure-track thing at Vandy, it's all going well, like you're getting the grants, like
Yeah.
what made it up for you?
So I met Jeff Dotchis, who was then CEO at OneDrop. He had been recently diagnosed with diabetes. He was super passionate about what he was creating and the product. And also he had a lot of prior success with businesses.
Right.
And I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, this seems like the right recipe for it. He wants me to join the team. I was hire number 12. He didn't even know what he wanted me to do necessarily. He just wanted me on the bus. And I thought, he's taking a big leap of faith. I'm going to take a big leap of faith, and we're going to see what this could look like. My employer was like, wait, what? You're going to do what? Why don't you make sure that this is what you want to do? Because you do realize you have a college benefit for your kids. We can also give you a sabbatical so you can go test drive this and make sure it's what you want. I declined the sabbatical because I knew that in order for me to really understand this new world, I had to be all in. I couldn't be tethered because I had trainees, I had a lab, I had R01 research programs in flight. And there was no way I was going to be hands off on those things while I go do this startup. It just wasn't going to work. So I made the hard decision and parted ways.
If it hadn't been OneDrop, do you think you'd still be in academia?
No.
You knew there's a part of you that knew at some point this was not going to be it.
I couldn't do that for the rest of my life. I couldn't painfully build technology and just go through that process. I really wanted, at the same time, one of my cousins died of diabetes complications, and everything I was doing research-wise at Vanderbilt couldn't have helped her, but I go to OneDrop, we're building this app with coaching and a Bluetooth connected meter, and it has a global footprint, downloaded every country around the world, even in American Samoa. And when that happened, that was like a huge source of validation for me, because now it could have helped her. Now something I was working on could actually help the people I care about.
Yeah, I was talking with another guest on the podcast, and one of the turning points for him was looking at sort of the citation rank of one of his papers and sort of realizing nobody's reading this, right? Like I could have exactly the right answer and no one would know.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Dissemination is key.
Yeah, I hear that. So you feel like even if it wasn't OneDrop, it would have been something.
It would have been
something.
about
coming to OneDrop as employee number 12 with sort of a broad kind of unknown remit. How did you carve out what applied behavioral science was going to do and look like at OneDrop at such an early stage?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'm good with data. They had a ton of data. And I went in and I started looking at the data and saw the impact that we were having and shared that with Jeff. And he's like, wow, how do we tell that story? And I was like, well, I know how to tell stories with data. And so immediately started beating that drum, and we published a few papers. We got some abstracts accepted, presented those, got some, actually ended up doing some randomized control trials there. So we got some pharma funding, wearable device funding, and ended up doing these remote clinical trials, which it was just super fun. And we were able to get, really good outcomes. And I was able to present outcomes to Apple executives and get our app on the watch on Apple's website. And these were just like things that I would have never expected that I would be a part of. And it was validating, it was energizing. It made me knew that I had landed on my feet and where I should be.
How did you explain what it was that you were trying to do to your colleagues at OneDrop? Like, how did you tell the story internally about all of these, because there's sometimes at startups, it's like, I don't know, why are we publishing a paper? Like, how is that accretive?
Oh yeah,
How do
people would look at me like I had three heads. Like, who are you? What do we do with you?
yeah.
And I have found that it's better to show when there's that I can't fit you anywhere. And how I showed my value is through the data and what it meant. Oh, we're improving glycemic control. Whoa, that's really cool. That's value. You are illustrating how we're valuable. And now let's go tell that story. I find that sometimes people have a hard time ramping up when they're trying to articulate to people who aren't familiar the value that behavioral scientists can bring. I've found that demonstrating that and showing that can often carry more weight than speaking to it.
And how were you getting a sense of what the business valued?
Well, because we had a device, because we were, reaching, millions of people, we needed to show that we're delivering health outcomes because that's what people care about, even in the market. And so, and that's the impact that Jeff wanted to have on people. He wanted to not just get the downloads, but really wanted to improve people's lives and their health. And so I was able to share that in a meaningful way. Once I did that, created value, put some points on the board, it also opened up, well, what else can I do? And that's when I started partnering with product. I partnered with the product team and we created a feature in the app where we could predict where blood glucose was going to go, something that a CGM does not do. But based on all the data you put into the app, we can tell you that, oh, in an hour, your blood sugar is going to fall. Push notification. This is what you should do to prevent that from happening. I was involved in those push notifications. So this was really when we started moving into the behavioral science AI coming together of, okay, this is the forecast. This is what you can expect. Here's what you could do to offset that.
And that leads you, I mean, you get a ton done there, but you're only there 2.5 years before you go to Lirio.
Yes.
What about Lirio made you go, oh man, this is the next step for me?
Yeah, as I mentioned, getting involved in product, I wanted to do more product.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a real, the role at Lirio was going to be largely all product, although there was an arm and opportunity to do research, product was really the focus in the early days. And that excited me. I wanted to do more of that.
What in your experience at OneDrop made you go, hey, product is the direction I want to head versus, as an example, like continuing down more of the data informatics path or sort of, there's paths available to you.
Yeah.
What about the product path like kind of lit you up?
So I've always been interested in medication management and adherence. All my publications are in that space, health equity. And what I've seen with the research that I've done and what other people have done, that you really have to personalize how you address barriers in order to get the outcomes you want, but also to close disparities gaps. And so I really saw the potential at OneDrop when we were doing, forecasting and behavioral science together. That was a really cool personalization. And so when I learned about the Lirio opportunity and was recruited over there, I thought, wow, this is going to do a lot of good because this is personalization at scale. This is automated personalization with behavioral science and AI on equal footing. Like if anything's going to move the needle in a way that creates better behavioral outcomes, health outcomes, and reduces disparities, this is it.
And this is when you take on the chief behavioral officer title. What did Lirio think they were getting?
That's a good question. They needed someone to lead behavioral science at the time. There was a head of behavioral science, but I think they really wanted it to um, have, as great a weight as the AI side of the house was having. They had recently hired a chief AI officer, and they wanted a behavioral science counterpart.
Mm.
So that was I think part of the reason why that came to be.
And what, as you come to this company that at least on the surface is very bought in theory, they know what behavioral science is. In theory,
Yeah,
they've decided they want it. When you got in, did you feel like, oh yeah, they really understand what it is they've bought, or
we
was there like an
do.
educational
Yes.
process?
Yeah, already behavioral science and AI was a part of their lingo. I didn't have to sell it to them.
Nice.
They were already marketing themselves as a, behavioral science type company. They weren't in the health space. They were doing, conservation, environment type work with energy companies, a little bit of fintech. It wasn't until maybe about a year into my joining that we started really moving into the health space exclusively.
And how did you feel about that transition?
It was tough for me. I thought I was abandoning diabetes, and that was, core to my identity. But it also brought me back to my early days of doing, environmental applied research. And so I thought, okay, there is an interest. Let me see where this goes. And I did see where the potential was for moving into health, as did the other executives who wanted to move in that direction at some point.
Yeah. So there was a ton of alignment there for sure. What was challenging about Lirio? I mean, you come into an environment that on the
Yeah.
surface looks, you know, so many behavioral scientists come to me and they're like, oh man, I just want to learn from a team and I want to be someplace where I
Yeah.
don't have to sell it all the
Yeah.
time. And so, you step into Lirio where
Sure.
in theory it's all going well. What was challenging? What was hard?
Yeah. So at Lirio, I had a two-person team, someone who was in charge of content, another who was more of had marketing skills. And so I really needed to grow a team. We ended up becoming a 14-person team in 2020 and 2021, which were really hard times. It's hard to grow a team during that period, particularly, you know, with all that was going on. But there were also, people who joined who hadn't been at companies before. These are like fresh PhDs. There's a lot of learning that needs to happen, a lot of coaching and mentoring. At the same time, Lirio was going through massive transformation too, leadership changes, restructuring. And so it was really hard to do all of that really well, given some of the contextual things going on.
And at some point, you not only are leading behavioral science, but also leading product. I mean, you sort of took over the product function and
I
really made
did.
deep inroads there.
Yes.
How did that feel?
It was great. I mean, I really buy into the Lirio product. We saw a lot of great outcomes. I was also co-leading our research lab in-house with Chris, who's currently the chief AI scientist over there. And I really enjoyed working with Amy Bucher, other behavioral scientists, our product designer at the time, product manager. I mean, I loved the team, a great group of folks. I also, personally burnt out. I was, working 12-hour days plus. I had a husband with cancer. I had two kids who were high risk COVID. I had my in laws living with me. We were affected by the Nashville tornado. It was like a perfect storm. And I'm someone who tends to like push, 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 even in the face of adversity. But this was like, the world's falling apart,
How
sort
did
of
you know it
level of
was, how did you know it was time?
heaviness.
How did you know it was time to take a break? I mean, lots
I
of
knew
people
it
are
was
doing crazy
time
things.
when I was actually willing to do it, when I was like, I really can't go on. And so I made the choice to leave over the holidays going into 2022, and then parted ways in the new year.
And so you feel like recognizing for yourself, hey, I might want to break was the breaking point, right? As someone who's so resistant to the idea of taking a break and doing it, who's traditionally done it all and been an
Yeah.
overachiever, as many first generation
Yes.
college kids are, the very fact that you were receptive to a break was sort of your warning sign that, like, oh shit, something might be going on.
It's time. Yeah.
How was taking a break?
Hard. It was hard. Um, there was a lot of focus, time, and energy kind of putting myself back together.
Mhm.
Um, that was, I think, the hardest part. There was also fun happening. Like I took on a pet project of renovating a property and turning it into an Airbnb. There was a lot of dedicated time with my family, traveling with them and being more actively involved in their lives. I became my daughter's softball coach for her 8-year-old team and 10-year-old team, and that was a lot of fun. And really just was out in nature a lot, reading, a lot of hammock time, trying to like soak up all this precious time that I was able to get.
And then what told you that you were ready to come back? In the same way that it took sort of
Yeah.
being willing to take a break to give you the clue that maybe that needed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
When did you know, oh, it's time for this to be done? It's time to move on. I'm rested. I'm ready.
Yeah. I didn't know what that looked like. I actually went into contracting about a year after I left Lirio. I started picking up consulting opportunities, and working probably about part time. So it was like an on ramp a little bit. And then I was able to connect with someone I knew at AdhereHealth. Was introduced to him when back in the days when I worked at Lirio because we were trying to create some sort of partnership with the two companies. And I was really excited about what they were doing because they're in the medication management and adherence space. So I connected with the person that I knew over there, and there really wasn't an opportunity for me to contract with them. But then they had a massive reorganization. And when the time was right, they reached out to me and said, hey, we're ready for a contractor. Why don't you come help us with some stuff? And I did. And then about a year ago, they decided to bring me on full time.
And as someone who went this contract to hire, pipeline, which I think is a really great one because it lets you sort of
Test it out.
test it out and get to know each other and
Yeah.
feel a little more confident and comfortable. When did you know for yourself that it was time to go in-house, that it was time to, because you really had this contracting life, it was successful for you, you were
Yeah.
helping other companies, you got that diversity. It's hard for sometimes people to know, hey, when do I give up that diversity and really double down on one thing? What did that
Yeah.
feel like for you? How did you come to that place?
I really missed collaborating. And I found that, when I was consulting, there were a lot of benefits to it, but really collaborating with the team there wasn't much of that. It was kind of like I was hired to do something and I'd go over here and do it and then deliver it. And I thrive off of collaborating and cross functional work. Um, I also was really excited about the fact that AdhereHealth is based in Nashville and they have an office, and I could actually go into the office and interact with people. And I really enjoy the people who are leading the way over there. So it felt right. It felt different, and it felt right. And personally, being a professional is a huge part of my identity. And I didn't feel complete, that something was missing. And so even my kids noticed about a month or two in, they were like, Mom, you're so much happier. And I'm like, yeah, I know. That was a missing piece.
Yeah, I think for people, to your point, who, their professional identity is a strong part of their overall identity. contracting can feel a little bit like coasting, right? It can feel a
Yeah.
little sort of, it feels good. I mean, it feels good to help people. It feels good to do
Yeah.
things, but it doesn't have the same intensity that
No,
being in-house and, being with people and really struggling day to
impacting the
day.
strategy
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I can certainly hear that. And then, you came in as chief behavioral officer and then very quickly pivoted to chief experience officer. Tell me about that decision to sort of broaden the behavioral science tent to include sort of a larger group of things.
Yeah. So with the chief behavioral officer role, love it, by the way. You've been there, others have been there. Um, I struggled with explaining it well to
Mhm.
people. And and I even today, when I get referred to as this is our behavioral scientist, I find it limiting because what we can do really has a lot of space and breadth to it. And so I really appreciate the chief experience officer title because it gives our tool set space.
Mhm.
And it also is a title that exists and people understand and know. And so there's less explaining to do.
Yeah. Do you find a lot of the explaining was happening internally? Like you're trying to help other Adhere Health people understand, hey, here's what I'm here to do? Or was it more,
Externally.
yeah, it was more about external
It was
explanation.
like, oh, you're the behavioral health person. No, I'm not, you
Yeah.
know? Um,
Yeah, that is one of uh, the great conundrums, I think, for specifically in health, right?
yes.
Where there's this other adjacent term that means something really, really, really different. Like, I don't know why clinical psychology suddenly became behavioral health. I don't know if it was like we're trying to like rebrand the word clinical. I don't know why we decided that behavioral health was like a great term, especially
Yeah.
since it very often isn't behavioral, right?
No, you're
It's
right.
it's very
Yeah.
much like emotions and
Yeah.
cognitions, right? I'm like, that's
Hmm.
not, they're not even using CBT or DBT or one of the like more,
Yes.
right? It could be like straight talk therapy and they're like behavioral health. And I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
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 That can be a challenge. As you having pivoted as chief experience officer, do you feel like that's easier to explain? Do you find that people have a better idea of what you do at first glance
Yes.
as you move into that?
Yes. Oftentimes it's, oh, you're responsible for customer experience or the consumer experience, which I am. Um, and our customer, we're a B2B C company. So customer has a few different faces.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's a really unique role because I get to work with great people at AdhereHealth who are um, responsible for the entire customer life cycle. And we get to embed behavioral science best practices into that journey for our enterprise clients. But also, we get to put behavioral science into the actual individual consumer's experience as well.
And that B2B to C place can be hard, right? Disintermediated behavior change, right? Where you're
Yes.
having to work through someone else is so common in health, right? Unless
Yes.
you're literally the doctor in the room,
Mm-hmm.
you're very often working through some sort of proxy. Uh, that can be really a struggle. How do you sort of help your team think about that sort of proxy
Mm-hmm.
behavior change?
Yeah. So we have a large clinical team of pharmacy techs, nurses, pharmacists. This care team is outreaching to people all over the country. So they're on phone calls with them, they're communicating with them in different ways. We have digital channels, text messaging, we communicate with their physicians, we communicate with their pharmacies, we use faxes, we message through the EHR, we use digital feeds on a cell phone. So all of these channels can have behavioral science. When it comes to the care team, the training, we train on motivational interviewing. All of their call guides have behavioral science embedded. We talk about, how to leverage different behavioral science techniques. And so that's really core to how we deliver, behavioral science when we're communicating with a patient or a prescriber or a pharmacist, and also we use behavioral science when we're communicating digitally.
Talk to me about teaching and training internally, because a lot of it, those are your proxies. Your proxy is this clinical health team. What is it like to teach and train internally? How do you structure that? Is it compulsory? Is it is it optional? Is it lunch and learns? Like, how do you feel like evangelizing
Mandatory. It's mandatory for our care team. So we have training modules that everybody has to go through. We have testing, pre-post. Have you, absorbed the material? We have phone call reviews where we look to see, are they using behavioral science? Are they using motivational interviewing? That allows us to teach to goal, all of those sort of best practices.
Which again, I think, I have no doubt, knowing all the young behavioral scientists that talk to me, people will be envious of your career, right? The ability to have compulsory teaching, the ability to be at a place where you don't have to explain behavioral science, right? Those are really wonderful career opportunities. As you look back, do you think there's a part of you that you haven't been in academia for a while, research has been a smaller part of your life for a while? Mm-hmm. Do you miss it?
I do miss research. I do. And I've had these conversations with my husband where I've said, do you think I'll ever go back? And he's like, I don't think you will, but maybe you will, later in life. Who knows what the academic landscape looks like then,
Yes, certainly, as Hillary Mason and I have talked about, what does the research part in particular of academia look like in a world where academia is going through all of these changes? That for sure. And you're still, very young and, mid-career, right? You've had a lot of very senior titles, but you have a lot of years in front of you to decide, what things. Mm-hmm. It's not like you're becoming, sort of professor emeritus a year from now, right. Retiring. You've got some time to continue hanging around with me at in this wonderful series, because you really have had such a wonderful career. It has been very health focused. Is there a part of you that wants to look outside of health at some point?
I don't think so. I'm really passionate about it. It's actually a value in my household. And my Samoan family is struggling left and right with chronic health issues. And I feel very fortunate that I'm in a place where I can be a part of that solution, because there aren't many, Samoan health researchers who are trying to really make a difference.
Yeah, it's not a large.
And that means a lot.
You are definitely the only Samoan behavioral scientist.
The only one I know, and if they're out there, I really want to know them. So if you hear this, please find me.
find the other Samoan behavioral scientists.
Yes.
To your point, though, there is this interesting genetics, epigenetics sort of, as genetics merges into epigenetics, and we start looking at hey, how does behavior get coded back in? There does become this sort of maybe enhanced focus on behavior as a potential, long-term solution for things. So often we think of behavioral science as sort of a point solution. Hey, I need people to get flu shots today, and so I get them to get flu shots today because that's the thing that I need them to do today.
Right.
But, at the epigenetic level, when we're talking about things that are literally getting coded over the long term, there is a sort of behavioral science lens on this is the way that we sort of shape our way back to a healthier genetic stock.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, look, I will always be fascinated to see what you do next.
I feel the same way about you.
Well, look, I'm just tired. I'm just tired right at the moment. Thank you.
That exists in your world.
I told my team today, I was like, I think I need a vacation. I'm getting a little cranky. So rather like your point earlier about just knowing when it's time. I at least know that I need 2 days off. I don't know that I need a full sabbatical, but I need
maybe not 2 years, but 2 days.
Maybe not 2 years, maybe 2 months, but 2 days I will take. So I feel you on that. Well, look, I appreciate so much you coming on. You have such a fascinating and unique story. I think, we have so many academics on the show who, sort of left their PhD program or finished their PhD program and then went into industry. I think it's rare to see somebody who really did spend, you gave academia a meaningful shot, right? They had their opportunity and they messed it up. They missed out on the Chandra of the future. If only they had been able to hold on.
Tenure had been achieved. Like it was right there. It just needed the stamp. I'd finally gotten there and walked away.
Yeah. I mean, and look, I think to the benefit of a lot of people who have benefited from your time at One Drop and Lirio and now at Adhere. So I think, academia's losses are gain. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it can help.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Well, look, I mean, you and I are lucky because we get to see each other. So many behavioral scientists are in such far-flung locations, right? You come home to visit family, you're right up the road. It's not that hard.
I know, that's right.
I'm telling you, San Diego is like the behavioral science.
I know, it's like a little mecca over there.
100%. I still think we should do the behavioral science hangout. I don't think there's a conference in me. I'm not organizing a conference, but man, I can organize a barbecue.
All for it.
You and me and Steph Habib can be an anchor, and anybody else that wants to join, come on by.
That's right.
B-Sci Hang 2026.
It's happening.
All right. I love it. Well, Chandra, thanks so much for coming. I appreciate you. As always, I hope we find that other Samoan behavioral scientist out there. We're going to find him. We're going to bring him to you.
Yes. And maybe they'll be at the hang.
And then they'll be at the hang. Oh, man, I love it. Chandra, so good to see you. I appreciate you.
Always a joy. Thank you.
Yeah.